Welcome in, everybody, to the Warchant TV Roundtable alongside the founder and administrator of Warchant.com, Gene Williams. He is to my right on the screen. Underneath me, Ira Schoffel, the managing editor of Warchant.com, Warchant TV. And in the bottom right, the host of the wildly popular Jeff Cameron Show, which you can catch right here on Warchant TV, Mondays, Wednesdays through Fridays, 1 p.m. Again, right here on Warchant TV. He's Jeff Cameron. It's a lot of content, folks. We've got a lot of experts here on Warchant TV. So if you haven't done so yet, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel. It's completely free, and you'll have the best FSU coverage in the business. That's what we do at Warchant TV. So today's topic in our Warchant Roundtable, FSU coaches are on notice after AD Michael Alford dismissed Mike Martin Jr. That news came down last Friday. And so what does it mean for other coaches? We're going to talk about that. But first question I will ask to everybody, and Gene, we will start with you. It's only 2 full seasons that Mike Martin Jr. was the head coach of Florida State baseball. Do you think that this move would have happened, this firing would have happened under any of Florida State's previous, say, 3 athletic directors?
I would say unlikely. You don't know the dynamic going. If we're going to go all the way back to Randy Spetman, I don't know if TK, was kind of calling the shots back then. So if TK had a problem with it, I mean, maybe TK would have done it. But under the last 2, absolutely not. I don't think so. I think Stan Wilcox was going to do whatever's easy. I just don't think he would have shaken up the Martin, longevity, what's going on there. I don't think he wanted to be in that position. I think David Coburn with Thrasher kind of running the show there, those 2 guys in tandem, I think they just wanted to maintain the status quo. They didn't want to shake waves because they knew they were both short-term and they weren't going to do anything. So I really think this is a little different with Mike Alford now. I think he's really – and Ira and I sat down in a meeting with Michael Alford right after he was hired as CEO of the Boosters. And I remember him, first thing that kind of struck me is how he sits down with all the coaches and he makes them accountable, whether it's financial, wins and losses, those kind of things. I don't think the other 3 athletic directors really had a plan to make the individual coaches accountable for what was happening on and off the field with their programs. That's why I think these coaches – there is a little bit, we're going to get to that later, there is a little bit shorter window with these coaches now at Florida State to prove their worth to the university and to the athletic department.
If I may here, Tom, I'll add to that by saying the reason that none of the previous athletic directors, going all the way back to Spetman, would have done anything about it is because they were impotent to do so. They were puppets. Those athletic directors were not in a position where they had the authority to hire or fire really anybody. And Florida State's situation was a very unique one. It had more to do with the boosters and the way that was arranged. So coaches, I don't think ever feared being held accountable like they do now with Michael Alford, because those other athletic directors did not have autonomy to really do much of anything. We can go back each individual athletic director and talk about their strengths and their shortcomings. But one thing for sure is post Dave Hart, none of them had the same sort of authority. And so I don't think they could have done much of anything without the president's approval. In some situations, as Gene alluded to, previous presidents in essence ran the athletic department. So this is a very different scenario. It looks like it's playing out now that Florida State has modernized their athletic department in the way that they work with the boosters to have a real athletic director who has the authority to hire and fire people when he believes the jobs aren't getting done.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The only thing, the only thing I would add to that, Jeff and Gene, is that I do think the Mike Martin Jr. situation was a little bit of an outlier because this was not a head coach that was hired with years of experience. It was not a head coach who had done a great job at a bunch of other schools, and Florida State went out and lured him in and gave him the free reign that you would give another head coach. I think that this was always seen when they kind of sold this. Mike Martin Jr. was not a unanimous pick by any stretch of the selection committee. There were a lot of people who did not like that hire, but I think one of the ways they sold it was to people inside the department was, look, he's not going to be expensive. We can get him cheap. And if it doesn't work out, he doesn't have a lot of history as a head coach, we can make a move pretty quickly. So I think that is part of it as well. If Mike Martin Jr. had been a guy who had been a head coach for 15 years somewhere else, I don't know. And maybe if the program wasn't trending as poorly as it seemed to be this season, I don't know that they make that change. I think that was part of it as well.
Well, folks reacted to that, and they did so in a big way on Warchant TV when we broke the news on Friday. Ira, you, myself, and Aslan had a discussion about Mike Martin Jr. being dismissed as Florida State's baseball coach. But then after about 10 minutes, people start to think about the big program, the big one, football, and that's obviously coming up in the fall. We'll cover that on Warchant TV. But there have to be some implications for Mike Norvell with a signaling that Florida State has money to go and pursue another baseball coach at a much more expensive amount of money than Mike Martin Jr. was making. Wouldn't you agree? And we'll start with Jeff. What do you think? What do you think the implications are, simply put, for Coach Norvell now that this move has been made?
I do think it's a different situation. I think the money is much different. And when we talk about if you were to move on from Mike Norvell as opposed to moving on, as Ira just talked about, with a relatively small salary of $400,000 or thereabouts, it would be very different than Mike Norvell, obviously. If you're looking at the spirit of that, the overriding question, is Florida State in a better financial position than they were a couple of years ago? And if a hard decision has to be made, are they willing to make it? Yeah, I think this may be an indicator that we're moving in that direction for sure. I think you go back to what we've seen so far with Mike Alford, right? The Gregorian situation, I think, played out in a way that was probably not favorable to him amongst the fan base. This is a situation that plays out favorable to him, I think, with the fan base, but it's also an indicator that perhaps he has a greater imprint, a greater position of strength to have on this athletic department. And I would think that not just Mike Norvell, but coaches across the board are looking at this as okay, it's the dawn of a new day to some degree. Now, there's nuance to all of this, as we well know. Mike Norvell would have to have a disastrous season, in my opinion, to be fired after this year. But I suppose it's on the table, yes.
So, Gene, we'll go to you next. Obviously, if you look at the rundown of what Michael Alford's done so far, they're going to commit more money to baseball. That's what this money means. Just by where this move means with Coach Martin Jr., it's not only a buyout, you got to pay more for another coach, and they're not going to pay $450,000 for a new coach. Lonnie Alameda, over the life of her contract, if she is not extended or doesn't go anywhere else, is going to make likely well over $5 million to coach softball at Florida State. And Coach Mark Krikorian, who turned down the offer from Florida State, would have been the highest paid soccer coach in the country. So Florida State's not only investing in football, and it's not one of those circle the wagons, move all the financial coins and dollars to the center of the table for football only. This is an expense athletic department wide. So what do you think this says about where Coach Norvell stands and how big this season is for him moving forward?
Yeah, and I'll add that I think the other thing you add up, Tom, I think they're probably going to end up paying $1 million plus maybe for the next baseball coach, especially if they get who they want to get. So that's a topic for another video roundtable. And by the way, a little selfless promotion here for Ira. Read his 321, where he talks about some of those topics in terms of the next baseball coach. But anyway, so yeah, I agree that this has greater implications for all the coaches. Like I said, the accountability, and that includes Mike Norvell, absolutely 100%. But I think we got to really look at some of the differences. There's a lot of nuances between what happened with Mike Martin Jr. and what's happening with Mike Norvell. It was trending in the wrong direction for Mike Martin Jr., and you saw no end in sight. There was no scenario where you looked at, absent just a lot of fortunate things happening, things were going to be better next season for Jr. And then you're in a tough position at that point. Then you're going to fire him anyway, and you're a year behind. Mike Norvell, let's face it, at the end of the day, the records sucked the last 2 seasons. No one's going to deny that. But, the thing you look at that really saves him in this situation, he was 5-3 in his last 8 games, and the 3 losses were against 3 quality teams, and those were competitive games. So things are trending in the right direction. And you guys all have sources within the athletic department and people around the program, and you always seem to hear positive things about his organization, about his interactions with everybody. That means something. If you're running a program in a way that people say, yeah, he's doing things the right way, I like him, he's working well with others, he's working hard, those things resonate and they matter. Where you look at the opposite, I think Mike Martin Jr.'s situation is a lot more akin to Willie Taggart, where things were trending poorly with that program. You heard about the disarray inside the program. He wasn't making friends. Nothing looked promising in the future. So I think that's really more to it. But at the end of the day, this, I think, is the season. You've talked about a lot on the Jeff Cameron show. Mike Norvell's got to do something this season. He's got it. Florida State, at the very least, has to have a winning record or at least get to a bowl game at the absolute bare minimum. If not, then I think this is a real discussion. That's when accountability comes into play, where Mike Alford's going to be, you're right, probably not fired unless things completely unravel this season. But, man, that would be a sign that things, again, trending in the wrong direction. And where's Florida State going to be in a year or two if things start trending downwards in 2022? That's ultimately the issue here. So, yeah, I do think, for a long-winded answer, I do think coaches, including Mike Norvell, are a little bit on notice. That window is a little bit smaller than it was a couple of years ago.
Ira, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with everything those guys said. The only thing I would say is the message is definitely out there to some degree. Just being around football camp this weekend, I was out there, and some people around the support staff of football and different people in the university are asking a lot of questions about what happened with Mike Martin Jr. Why was he fired so quickly? I mean, it's one of those things that kind of gets everybody's attention. What does that mean? What is it going to mean possibly for us? But I echo what those guys said completely, in the sense that behind the scenes, things are trending in the right direction. When you talk to people around the football program, they talk about just the attitudes, kids doing what they're supposed to do, kids showing up on time, kids working hard, kids being good teammates, kids listening to the coaches, all the things you want to hear. Those were things you were not hearing necessarily about the baseball program, and the results on the field reflected that. I think they're willing to give Mike Norvell, again, who's been a head coach before, time for that to come to fruition on Saturdays, because there have been indications. If that wasn't the case, then I think Mike Norvell would be in more trouble than he is right now. But ultimately, you do have to win games, and this is a huge season.
Well, there's two sides to that coin, and Ira, I'll come back to you for the final question I have. But let's just say that Mike Norvell overachieves, and Florida State, whether it's injury luck is on their side, turnover luck, or they just get a lot better, and let's say they win 9 games, or 9 with a bowl, or 10 with a bowl, whatever it is, they overachieve this year. The other side of the coin, when you make moves like Mike Alford made, is now you're showing coaches within the athletic department, you got money to spend if good things happen. So it's not only about the bad and the quick hook, maybe, for being dismissed from the athletic department, but you actually could go back to him for more money now if they're going to spend this kind of coin on a softball coach or a soccer coach or a baseball coach. So what do you think if Mike Norvell overachieves? The athletic director is now looking at. It's a different problem, but it's still a meeting with Mike Norvell and his representation, I would imagine, right?
100%. I mean, the people who right now are still not sure that Mike Norvell's the guy, and I think that qualifies for the vast majority of the fan base in terms of not being totally sure he's the guy, they would hear this conversation and be like, what are you even talking about, a raise or an extension? But if you do play out that scenario where if he were to win 9 games, something like that, in year 3, we know for a fact, Jimmy Sexton, we've seen him do it at Florida State and schools around the country. He 100% will come back to Florida State and say, hey, these other schools are poking around. They want to know if Mike might be interested. And now Florida State would have to respond. So, that totally will happen. Now, it's also up to Michael Alford to act rationally and not panic. Sometimes these schools, sometimes these administrators panic and feel like, oh, we can't let anything happen, and just kind of sign over a long-term deal at a huge raise. They've got to be pragmatic. It still would be year 3, and this team still is far from where it needs to be in terms of talent. But, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Jimmy Sexton came calling at the end of next season.
Ira, can we call that the Charles Kelly syndrome there? The overreacting and overspending and just doing ridiculously, Florida State's been down that path with Jimbo Fisher over and over. So you're 100%. I hope this is a problem. How cool would this be a few months from now where you're talking about the extension and how much money and all that stuff? I mean, that'd be a great scenario for all of us. But, absolutely. And I would say, 2 things, Mike Norvell, he's obviously, you got to lock him up because, and Sexton's going to flood out those rumors. We're going to see all these bloggers putting out this SEC team is looking at Mike Norvell and this and this and this. But I think he's going to lock him down. The other thing is he's going to get on the phone with all his big boosters, and that, his dream is to do that massive expansion renovation of Doak Campbell Stadium. He's going to be – so in Florida State, in the dream scenario, beats Texas A&M in the Gator Bowl for that 10th win, and Jimbo's crying on the sideline. He's calling up DeVoe Moore and Sarah Blakely and all those people, like, throw the money at us now, baby. We're going to build out Doak with Spank Stadium. Let's do it.
Typically when we do these videos in reaction to something negative that's happened at Florida State, it doesn't end with us singing the praises of Mike Norvell and a 10-win season forthcoming. Typically we're a little bit more dour. I have to admit that anybody watching this is going, what the hell are these guys talking about 9 or 10 wins? But I will say this, if Michael Alford hears a rap at the door and it's Mike Norvell wanting to have a late night conversation after win number 10, I would imagine that as a by all means, come on in, good sir. Can't wait to chat about where your thoughts are at, because that hasn't been a conversation in Florida State in some time. So we would welcome the complexity of the issues that center around winning too much.
You miss the days of the end of season extortion from Jimmy Sexton.
Absolutely. I want to hear all about the extortion to be based on endless season after endless season of victory and victory. Yes, please.
Remember how pissed off our fans would get over and over? I mean, that was the biggest problem we had, was our fans were so angry that once again Jimbo's holding Florida State hostage with Jimmy Sexton. Yeah. And boy, how we just pray for those days. We want to talk a little bit about the other side if he underachieves. I mean, what position? So Jeff, let me ask you this: what if he has 5 wins again? And what does Alford do at that point? You're saying probably not firing, but does he make him shake up the staff? What does he do?
Well, he already tried to shake up his staff, and so I would think that you would have to follow through this time around and hire a new wide receiver coach or whomever it was that was underachieving at the time. I would suggest this. Yeah, I think he's got to do worse than 5 and 7. It'd be 4 and 8, 3 and 9, something like that. A cataclysmically bad season where you just have to make a move. But I have said this time and again, and I'll say it again here. This season's vital for a lot of reasons. But if you go 6 and 6, to some degree, even 7 or 5, I think you're kind of prolonging the inevitable. I know some guys disagree with me on that, but he will have no momentum in recruiting if that's the case. Again, no momentum in recruiting. And at that point, it doesn't mean that he's not cleaning things up behind the scenes and that Florida State isn't getting incrementally better. But I just don't know that long-term you'd get difference makers in here at that point. I think you have to have a splash season. And I would say the minimum to do that is 8 wins. I think it's a tough schedule. I think you have some big games that you would have to win if you're going to win 8 games. And I think they might be capable of that. They got to stay healthy. But short of that, I think that maybe his fate is sealed for any kind of middling season that he might have. But yes, I think it would have to be some sort of god-awful 3 and 9, 4 and 8. My goodness, they're not getting any better type campaign for them to pull the plug yet again. I don't know,
man. I think if 5 and 7, they may do it. I mean, I do. You would have no progress at all. And really, if you look at that schedule, it's a tough schedule, but there's about 4 games that you're going to win. So that means you went 1 and 7 in the other 8. I mean, it would have to be. It's hard for me to see.
You have to beat Florida at the end of the year or something, Really
even that, I just don't see it. I think
we have to look at
6 wins or 7 wins. You're still moving forward. Probably not where you need to be. I think I agree with you. You need to get to 8 wins probably to get over that hump. But I think less than 6 wins, man. I think there's a decent chance they would have to make a move.
My only caveat is that the reason I say that is the way it happens matters. If Jordan Travis gets hurt in week 2,
but then it's quickly, why did you
exactly? Why did you get a transfer? Why are you in this quarterback?
I've been asking that for a while.
Yeah. So I mean, I get it. But you're right. So I think 7 is kind of that. We don't know it's 7. Its context matters for everything on that. If you finish like this season, you finish strong with 7 wins and you beat Florida at the end, and you're showing a lot of improvement. Maybe Jordan missed 2 or 3 games in the middle of the season that you lost, but you got back. Maybe you're okay with that. Maybe that's just barely good enough. But at 7 and 5, if you're kind of middling, you get blown out in a couple games, maybe you don't finish strong, then you're probably right, Jeff. I think he's in a little bit of a difficult situation going into 2023.
Okay, so the final question I'll ask all of you guys, quick answers, because we've now done what a good athletic director will do. We've talked about the pie in the sky projection and the doom and gloom projection, and that's what Michael Alford has to do at all times for all sports. We'll start with Ira, and we'll go in that clockwise order. Gene, then Jeff. How many wins for Mike Norvell to make him definitely safe as the head coach moving forward and maybe in a position to get an extension? Is it 7 or 8 minimum number of wins? Ira?
Describe safe. I'm sorry. I know you wanted a quick answer. Safe. He's safe with 7 wins. But in terms of solid footing, this program's definitely going in the right direction. We can even talk about a possible extension. I think 8 wins.
Okay. Gene?
You have to say that. I said 7 could be safe. He's probably safe. Definitely, it's 7 wins. I mean, there's no doubt. And when you're talking about extension, man, I don't know, 8, maybe even 9 if he's going to get some kind of raise and all that kind of stuff. But 8, I'm very comfortable with 8. I think everybody's kind of hungry. I mean, sorry, almost a little profanity, cut it off. But I mean, you were 5 wins last year. If you go from 5 to 8. Yeah, and with a tough schedule, man, that's awesome. I mean, I think we'd all right now. I think 99% of the fan base would be that's good. Boom, we're going forward.
I like to say define your terms, Tom. Safe. He's safe at 6 and 6 in the sense that he's not going to get fired.
Yeah.
At 6 and 6, he's screwed long term, but he's safe in the immediate future at 6 and 6. I think any kind of pie in the sky scenario by which we're talking about an extension and a raise
Yeah.
That's 8, bare minimum 8. And even then, I'm not so sure. But yeah, he's safe at 6 wins. I don't think they'd fire him after a 6-win season. I just think he'd be screwed long term because he's not going to win in recruiting at that point.
I think if you're like all of the panelists, including myself during this video, you felt real hope for a while, and then you were down in the dumps for a little while. That means we've covered all the bases, and that's what we do at Warchant TV. So for the managing editor, Ira Schoffel, the founder and administrator of Warchant.com, Gene Williams, and the host of the wildly popular Jeff Cameron Show. They got a cool producer, too. He's Jeff Cameron. My name is Tom Lang. Thanks for tuning into Warchant TV. We will talk to you all for a Warchant Roundtable next time.